What's going on, STR Nation? Welcome back to a very special episode of the Short-Term Rental Secrets podcast. We are live in person in Boston at our April seven-figure boardroom retreat, and I've got E in person, which is amazing. We're going to get together a few times a year, but we have Wendy and Jay Papasan with us today, who are going to be doing an amazing workshop that I'm super excited for here in the next hour or so. And I don't want to steal your thunder because I love your story and what you guys have done to grow and build a business together and just really create alignment and structure around how do we build the life that we want? How do we create alignment on our goals? And, you know, a lot of our listeners are typically working some type of W-2 or sales job, and they're trying to figure out how do we get to that financial independence through real estate? How do we build this business? How do we build this portfolio and get on the same page with our significant other to get out of here? So I would love for you guys to share some background on your story, and then we can dive into all the amazing things from the books and the businesses and everything that you guys have accomplished.
Okay. Sounds great. I kind of feel like for this conversation, you can check me if I'm off. It kind of starts with me joining Keller Williams because we met in New York. We both had jobs. I was in publishing. You were in PR and marketing. Relocate to Austin, Texas. I get fired from my writing job at home when she comes home and finds me playing Diablo instead of querying articles. And I'd run out of people to call. It's like, all right, I'm still playing a game with the cat on my shoulders. She's like, you're getting the job. And I got lucky. I mean, took a newsletter writing job at a little company called Keller Williams. At that time, I think I was employee 27.
This was in 2000.
This was in 2000.
A long time ago.
Gary owned the building, Gary Keller, and it was like a Class C, like there was no elevator, you know, and like a pivotal moment for me is like he was plunging a toilet, and I told him, I was like, I hear you're writing books, and I had this history in publishing, and we connected, but that little entrepreneurial company, like they gave everybody a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. Mo Anderson, who was the CEO at the time, bought a cash flow, what was the cash flow game? Is it called cash flow?
Yeah.
Like, and bought it, because I mean, it wasn't cheap. I mean, if you were...
It was like $300 or something.
Yeah, it was something crazy.
Yeah.
And would let us rent it out so we could play it. And we just started kind of talking about business and entrepreneurship differently. Because if you don't have someone in your life to talk to, you don't think it's normal.
Yeah, because we'd moved from New York City, and the rent was so cheap in Austin, Texas, we were like, oh, well, we'll be renting forever. That sounds great. And then Jay joined Keller Williams and had a conversation with Mo, and we were like, oh, we need to focus on assets. And so he brought that asset conversation home. And so that started us on buying our first house. And our first house became our first rental property. And then since then, we've started, I guess, 6 businesses that we're sort of co-founders. We each run a certain amount of them. And yeah, we've got a lot of rental properties. Our net worth has skyrocketed. It's been pretty remarkable. So it's been quite a journey.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
When we were doing the interviews, you got the blue book there, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. I led the research with a lady named Heather Iaruso, and we interviewed 120 net worth millionaires. So like our rule was, do you have $1 million in equity, not value in your properties to qualify? And I mean, I was just showing one of my employees, still got the 3 binders where I would print up the interviews, the transcripts, and highlight the lessons. And that was kind of the decision point. I came home and I was like, do you want to try to do this thing? Do you want to like become investors? And
well, at that point I had quit my job. So that was 5 years into your journey there. I quit my job, and we'd had 2 kids back to back. I was a stay-at-home mom, kind of bored. And yeah, I was like, let's try our first flip.
Yeah. So our first wealth building plan, I think we said we were going to try to acquire 10 properties in 10 years. This is back when you could do a lot less down, right? That was the idea. And we were hoping for $75,000 in free cash flow and $1 million in net worth. Yeah. And
it's pretty much starting at zero at that point. Yeah.
The first time when Mo sent me home, she sent me home with the mortgage application as a net worth sheet. And we did our net worth the first time. That was the aha. Yeah. And I think it was like $2,200.
Yeah.
How long did that take you the first time?
It actually took 6.5 years, which is long. I feel like people now do it now very quickly.
It felt fast then.
But I wasn't working. You know, I didn't have a job. I mean, I did have a job. I was mom to our 2 kids, but The whole idea was just to acquire rental properties. And so I did a lot of sweat equity. I would drag the kids with me. We would do make readies. I would
driving for dollars for the kids.
Yeah, literally. I would clean the houses before they went back on the market. I would show all the stuff. And I didn't have my real estate license then, so I was just doing all of that. I thought, well, I'll just do it all manual labor kind of thing. And I'm hoping the kids hopefully they got some lessons from that back then as toddlers. Yeah.
We talked about that. I mean, I think it's true. I think especially like our oldest Gus, like I think they think it's normal for us to own a bunch of properties, which is a gift. Because like I grew up thinking, you could rent or own. Like I didn't so they've at least
one house.
Yes.
Or lifetime, and when you sell.
Or maybe you have a vacation house if you're really rich or something.
Yeah. But when you upgrade, you got to sell the one that you're in.
Right,
Because
exactly.
you can't keep the one you're in to get the next one.
Well, and that was the gift that we got with that first one was somebody, I can't remember who it was, probably Gary, when we were thinking about having our first child, we were in a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath. And so someone said to us, like, are you going to keep that first house as a rental? And I just remember thinking like, what? It was just like a lightning bolt for me. Like, no, that's not what you do. And that original rental we still have. So we've owned it for 20 years. We bought it for $175,000.
We thought we overpaid so bad.
Yeah.
We really did.
Really did. Yeah.
It's like in the heart of Austin. It was like, I remember that street, Heather, that we were on. I was like, I don't feel safe going any farther south back then. Right. It had like the fence around the front yard because it was it wasn't, but it was like, it was just different. And so it's like concrete blocks. I mean, it's nothing pretty.
7.5% interest rates back then. And that house that we bought for $175,000, we lived in it for 3 years. It's been a rental for 17 years. Complete strangers have paid our debt down, and now it's worth about $850,000. So, that original investment that we paid 3.5% down at 7.5% interest has just paid off in the long haul, and we still got tenants in there. So, yeah.
So when Jay came home and he was like, let's become investors. Because I think a lot of our listeners, right, probably one of the person in the couple that listens to the show, actually somebody told me this yesterday, their husband used to listen to the show in the shower. And she would come in the bathroom and be like, where is this man talking in the shower? And it's like, oh, they're just micing in. And it's just like, listen to it. Which I'm sorry, guys, if your spouse does that. But what was your response? Was it an immediate like, yes, I get it, I can understand it? Or was there some kind of pushback? Did Jay come with like his PowerPoint presentation? But like, no, look, I got 3 notebooks full of notes.
Yeah. I think for me, I was up for the idea of it, but I had a real kind of what I would call scarcity mentality, which is growing up in a really small town in northern Minnesota. My whole extended family is farmers, and just kind of like thinking like, oh, well, just getting by is great. Like getting by is good enough. And so to have him come home and for us to come up with these big goals of like, hey, let's go from $2,200 net worth to $1 million net worth. I just was like, that seems crazy. Like, there's no way we can do that. That's absolutely insane. And so that was definitely my mentality around it. And I think I was like, well, we can try. So, and I didn't know how we were going to do it or.
I don't think either of us completely believed it was possible.
No.
But, I mean, we had good influences around us from KW, but like we just started doing the things. Like we didn't have goal setting to the now like in the book, but I remember we worked it backwards that if we could on average save, was it $1,500 a month? Mm-hmm. We felt like I had a profit share distribution at the end of the year that would be like a dump of money. If we didn't use that to buy cars and TVs and we saved the money, we would have a down payment. Like was our plan. Like, so what was good is we'd gotten just enough knowledge to know if we just focus on this activity, these other things will happen. We certainly weren't able to afford a house a year, no. But the foundation by saving and trying to set aside the $1,500 a month became the kind of foundation of like stop our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Save a lot of money. We kind of made it a game.
We just felt poor for a really long time. I mean, we really did. I mean,
while a lot of our friends were buying big houses and cars.
And so like if you look at our graph for net worth, there's a definite hockey stick to it. And that whole line before it hockey sticks up is we just felt poor. And I think that was the good part, is like neither one of us is like a super spender. So that helped a lot. Like I had a scarcity mentality, but I was okay with being like really thrifty, thinking about the big goal. But yeah, it was.
I mean, we were hitting the deck of millions before you're like, okay, you can buy jackets when you want to. She would get on to me if I wanted to buy like a new hoodie or something. She's like, you don't need another hoodie, right? She's very thrifty by nature.
I'm working on it. I read Die with Zero. I don't know if you guys read that book.
No.
Oh, it's so good. It's Bill Perkins. I read it 2 times. And he just talks about how you have this, because when you have this sort of thrift mentality, that gets you a really long way. And then at a certain point you look up and you're like, wait, I can start spending some of this money. And that's his whole premise, is you want to die with 0. You want to figure out at a certain point how you start spending your money down. So
Like you don't have to make a sandwich when you fly anymore.
Right.
You can buy.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, Jay's such a reader. I mean, he reads several, so many books. And he was like, my Kindle only works when I plug it in. And I was like, well, just plug it in and read it. Like, what's wrong with you? He's like,
It's like $99. Come on, honey. And like, this is my job. I have to read. Right?
When it's like, we have an extension cord, so it's more comfortable for you.
That's a good.
but that's your first thought. And I think you can't always control your first thought. But my second thought, of course, if we get a Kindle.
One thing I pulled out of that, because it's interesting, because I grew up, again, my dad was an elevator guy. My mom worked at Macy's, very blue collar. The hard work was always instilled in me, and they were like, you just got to work your butt off in school, get good grades, get a good job, and do all those things. And I did all that. Yeah. And then I was a CPA for 10 years. And the first time that I even thought to do a net worth statement was when E and I met at Rock's Mastermind, and I was like, man, I got my MBA, my CPA, all this stuff. I'm like, why didn't anybody teach me any of this stuff? And it wasn't until I started getting around people that this is normal to look at this. This is normal to look at properties and build this up. And reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that was the catalyst. And then The Millionaire Real Estate Investor was the one that really clicked for me. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And to reverse engineer the numbers, I was like, we can do this. This is so tangible now. And it just normalizes it. And I feel like that was such a big part of getting around people that were like, yeah, this is normal, man. This is how you get ahead. It's not that complicated. It takes work and discipline, but you can absolutely execute on this.
Yeah.
But all your family, like my mom, is like, are you sure you want to do that? Right? Because it's not common. If you don't hang out with people that are kind of on the journey, you get these doubts and fears because you're stepping outside of the safe middle. And I also kind of we learned this with our school. If you get really enthusiastic, I think some people feel like you're judging them. And so you don't even talk about it sometimes. So we, when we were early in the journey, we liked to have dinner parties. That was one of our things we liked to do. But we knew that we needed to talk about it more. We needed to normalize this. So we started Millionaire Meals was the first incarnation. Yeah. I still remember the first one because Juan Pablo was on my left, my friend. And we just said, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about money. And when we were out and doing things, one of the things I was supposed to do is bring it up. And one of the things that shocked me, when he was working at the state government, Texas Historical Commission.
I had actually started my real estate at that point.
Well, this is before then. Okay. But we were normalizing talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked that people in these lower paying jobs, oh yeah, I kept my condo from college. I've got a rental. I was like, oh, there's rentals all around me. There's people who are investors. They may not think that is their identity, but they're doing it. But we don't talk about it. So they're hidden in plain sight. There were 2 people you worked with that had rentals. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
Because I think of those people as different. I thought investors must look and act differently than normal people.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's first you have the epiphany of okay, this is possible. Then at some point you make a real decision that you're going to go for it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had read this book in probably 2014, and I started going to different real estate meetups, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. And it still didn't feel real. And then we're talking offline. When my son was born almost 8 years ago, he had a very rare lung disease, and he had to be on oxygen at Boston Children's Hospital. And at a certain point, I ran out of vacation time, I ran out of sick time, and I had to leave my wife and my son there to go back to a desk and trade time for money. And it killed me. Yeah. It killed me. And I told my wife when I left, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to build us a business that gives us the income we want without having to trade time for money. And I knew it was going to be real estate. And then shortly after, I met a gentleman in the mastermind that we were part of that was doing Airbnbs. Before it was like a big thing. It was like 2017. And within a year and a half of starting that, I was out, she was out, retired my mom, got her to get to buy a rental up in the mountains.
Amazing.
And I needed that. I didn't know why.
Yeah.
You know, it was so painful at the time. But if that never happened, I don't think I'd be here. I definitely wouldn't be this far along. You know,
Right.
so I think whether nobody wants anything bad to happen like that, right? But I find sometimes you need to either artificially create it or find that drive.
A pattern interrupt. And
Yes.
70% of everything that we're doing every day is all patterning. So we're just living our lives, doing our thing, just like we were told to do. And so, yeah, sometimes it takes a really dramatic pattern interrupt to make a leap like that.
Well, you found a big why. We talk about that. Like you found the motivation to get you to do the difficult, scary things. When we do our little Hot Millionaires Club, our thing, like when someone joins,
We have a net worth club.
one of the first things we ask them is, why do you want to be a millionaire? And there's usually two categories. People think they want freedom or they want security, right? Freedom to or freedom from, like, would be the other way. And like, I just know that that's important on the journey. Like, if you can't figure out why this is important to you, you probably won't make the sacrifices early on that'll make it happen. So like, you got this stark, like, I am not going to be in this place again, sitting at a desk while my family's in a hospital. I don't wish that on anybody, right? But like, that's a real strong motivator, and people just need to find it for them. What do they want to avoid? What do they want to have that gets them to do those things?
Yeah. Well, and that, it was so severe, it allowed you to do it very quickly,
Yeah.
you know?
But it to that point, and I'm giving you kudos again, because this was the first catalyst. And the second one was when I read the one thing, you know, I was working 70 hours a week as a CPA. I had a side hustle as a photographer to try and pay the bills. And then I'm building up this real estate business. So when people are like, you know, I don't have time, I'm like, you do, you're just not managing it effectively, right? So I carved out 30 minutes in the morning after a run, get up super early, 30 minutes at lunch, 30 minutes at night. And I just kept asking, all right, what's the one thing I need to do? Because there's a million things you can do. And I'm like, I need lead generation. I need properties. I need owners, right? And so I just focused on that. And then it took 9 months to get the first deal. But once I did, it just snowballed. So I think people just, if you don't have that strong enough why, you just give up. It's like the 3 feet from gold thing, where it's like, if you just keep doing that, what you need to do, eventually that window is going to open.
It does. Well, Gary Keller said in a mastermind not that long ago, he said, if you are doing the activities of a millionaire, you actually are a millionaire. It's just a matter of time. And that just hit me so hard, because that's what you were doing when you were lead generating 90 minutes a day. You were doing the activities of someone who gets a lot of deals. It just took you 9 months. And for some people, it's 2 years or 5 years or whatever that looks like. But then that hockey stick is eventual. And I just think so many people now want that lightning bolt of whatever that's going to like ricochet them to the top. And success is really repeatable activities done over time. I mean, what are you doing habitually to get what you want, you know? So
I also think people just look at other people's outside and they see the outside that you don't know, right? Because you see Mike now, and unless you know his story and his path, or you guys, right? Like your story, your path is like, well, you guys are here now. It's like, well, 24 years ago, we had nothing, and we had to start living on less than we had, and we were comfortable being poor for a long time, or like acting poor because we were doing something. And people don't see that. They see just the end part, and they're like, well, I want that. I'm like, well, this is what it takes. It's like, no, I don't want that. I want this. I'm like, I understand, but to get here, I came from here. People are like, I don't want that.
well, and it's still hard. Like, it's still hard where we're at. You know, we wake up every day and we work hard every day. You know, it's not like we get to kick back at a certain point, you know, so.
It changes, and you change, you're stronger. And so you're a lot more accustomed to doing those hard things. So it doesn't feel as hard. But I think the misperception you're talking about, the hockey stick shape, like, you know, things compound, and it always kind of shocks you when they pop. But that's when it's noticeable, not just to you, to everybody. So they just see that hockey stick moment, and they don't realize that you had to put in usually, I mean, I think on average, like 8 to 10 years. And that to kind of get the impact of that time compounding and the activities to really pop. Yeah.
Well, I can remember someone asked me to come teach my first wealth class in Minnesota. And so I like charted all of our net worth and like all these things that we did in order to grow our net worth. And then we had this hockey stick, and it's so funny because I asked Jay, I was like, well, what did we do right here? Like where the hockey stick started to go up. And he was like, duh, Wendy, like that's the 10 years hockey sticking. I'm like, oh yeah.
It was like, you had the bar chart, so each year, and like she put like a little, like this is when we bought Haven, and this is when we bought this. And then there's like a blank, like there's like, we had a little bit of a gap, and then that's when everything started. And I was like, yeah, that's time.
Yeah, it's so funny. But like even when you're in it, even when you kind of know, you don't really understand the power of compounding, really. No.
I'd love to ask you one thing, because at the beginning, now you guys have 6 different businesses. And I remember when I was starting this entrepreneurial thing, I was trying to do a lot of different things. I'm like, all right, maybe if I flip a house, or if I get some rentals, or maybe I'll syndicate an apartment building, or do the Airbnb thing. And a friend of ours, Matty A, gave me this advice from GoBundance years ago. He's like, Mike, you're a smart guy. You've got clear goals, but you got to pick one thing and go all in on that thing. And I see a lot of people where they're chasing a lot of rabbits, or they're like, I need 7 income streams or whatever. In my experience, now I have several businesses, but I've always grown it to a certain point, implemented systems, got the right people in place. Then I can make the jump to the next thing and the next thing. And I'd love to hear from you, what was the one thing for both of you, and how has that grown over time?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of our wealth has come from just owning long-term rentals, right? So the slowest, boringest way you can do it, right? Where time kind of cures a lot of the problems. 2 of our properties were our residences that we turned into it. We just didn't sell them. We did a few flips. Like we've experimented. I did a couple of angel investments, but like very quickly you look up and you realize like we've got this thesis, and it's around owning rental properties and running service businesses. And we both had really great access to smart people. Like I remember when the network thing for real estate, like I can knock on Gary Keller's door, Mel Anderson's door. I have these people that are lifers, and they're at the heart of this industry. Like I had such an unfair information advantage. It's like investing in stocks and working on Wall Street or something. You just feel like, oh, I've got access. I was like, well, that makes sense. And then franchising and real estate, like you got your real estate license that to help us on our investor journey. It's a service business. So we also had a lot of access. So what I would say our one things are, we know a lot about long-term hold renting and, investing. And we know a lot about owning and running service businesses. And I remember when all the crypto stuff happened, and I'm not going to knock anybody who's made money in it, but like when we defined the difference between speculating and investing, like right now, it's like, this just feels like speculating.
What was it, the tulip bubble? I used to say that all the time. I was like, this feels like a modern tulip bubble.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens every so often. The tulip bulb craze in Holland, right? Yeah. The Augustus, I remember, is the one that was so, like, got everybody crazy. But you look up and I was like, someone was saying, we're making a lot of money doing this. So there were smart people I knew that really were early, and they had a vision for it. And I was just like, I've got a really boring thesis that's gotten us so far. Why would I go back to first grade and try to learn this thing unless what I was doing really wasn't effective anymore? So I do think as business people, we do have to pivot from time to time. We do have to change and adjust our strategies, or we won't. You just can't ride that forever, but it's usually within a fairly narrow frame. So I just kind of like, I feel like I've cast my lot. Like I've spent decades getting really good at these. I'm not going to change until the world absolutely forces me to, because man, we're right in that part where the hockey stick just keeps compounding. Why would we derail that? Yeah. What is the Warren Buffett quote, right? The 3 rules of compounding is like, don't interrupt, don't interrupt, don't interrupt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't die. Yeah. Well, and I think once you start one business, you can start another one, but it does take a long time to figure out that first one. So it's doing everything that you said. For me, I got my real estate license because I had been doing the investing side for about 5 years, and Jay kept bugging me to get my real estate license because he'd been working at KW, didn't have his license yet. And so my goal that first year, which was such a humble goal, this is after Jay had wrote The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. My goal for that year, my first year in real estate, was to make $15,000, which is such a humble goal. And at the time, it was a lot of money for us because I hadn't been working. So I thought
that's a down payment on a rental property.
that was the whole thing. And I actually found my very first plan for the year, and it was all lead gen. And I ended up selling 18 houses my first year in real estate, and I made $85,000, which was twice as much money as I'd ever made before in my life. And
you mostly worked between 9 and 2 o'clock, because you were dropping off and picking up the kids and set some hard boundaries.
Yeah. So that was,
18 houses per year of real estate. It's impressive. Yeah. You kind of just put that in there, but I've been in real estate for a long time. I don't know a lot of people that year one sell 18 houses. Given you were in the right environment with the right people.
She did the right things.
But I mean, I think
she did the right thing.
I think it's just a testament of you can not for me, it's always been what's the next year? What's the next year? I think I'm much better now. What's my 10-year goal? We're going to be talking about goal setting to the now. But back then it was okay, well, this is my goal. And if I exceed it, awesome. And so I just think for anybody out there who's kind of struggling with a scarcity mentality or thinking bigger, you can have a goal, and then the next year, the goal can just be the next year. It doesn't have to be this great vision of you in 20 years or whatever. That just was it's easy for me now, but it was really hard for me then. So.
I know we're getting tight on time, but I would love to kind of bring it back to what we're going to be talking about next door too, about are there any tips that you have for getting your spouse or significant other on the same page? Because I know we were talking offline, it tends to be one person is all in on this makes so much sense, we should do this, and then in a lot of cases the other spouse is maybe a scarcity mindset or just more of a safety mindset of this sounds really scary, this sounds risky, I don't know. How do you help create that alignment?
So I think we can tell the origin story, but I think the fundamental thing that we've done well, and Wendy gets credit for starting the journey, is we started setting goals together in a real earnest way. It wasn't just a New Year's resolution, I want to lose weight or we do this vacation. We really went a little deeper and started setting some long-term goals together and talking about why they were important.
Yeah.
And I think when you have insights into why it's important for someone to be on the journey they're on, your partner, this is why I want to go into investing, this is why I'm doing it and how it impacts our family, and you create space to have a real discussion. Y'all know what a drag-along partner is in a contract. I hate being a drag-along partner. You have no voice. You just kind of whatever they do, they do. You your spouse can end up being that if they're not a participant in the process. So I feel the thing that we've done really well.
Yeah.
We started 18 years ago.
We did it when our kids were little, and I said, you know what? I just feel it because I was kind of hungry for my next thing, and so I just said we're going to take a weekend away, and I came up with all these questions, and I said I want to talk about our marriage, how's our sex life, what do we want to do, where do we want to put our kids in school, what are all of our, and it was this whole framework around all these questions that we asked each other. Because most people don't do that when they're married. If you're lucky, you go to church and somebody gives you sort of that class. But for a lot of people, they don't do that. And so for us, it was kind of like a reset after our kids were born. And we just spent the weekend away without our kids. We got a massage. We had a nice dinner together, romantic weekend. And we came out of that weekend with a lot of clarity around hey, this is what I want. Jay was hey, this is what I want. And so we've just kept that up. So we've been doing an annual couples goal setting retreat for 16, 17 years now. And about 6 years ago, it was so powerful. We'd give our framework out to people. People would be we see what you're doing. What are your questions? So we would give the framework and the questions out. And then about 6 years ago, after Jay started the One Thing business, we decided to bring it to other couples. So we host an annual couples goal setting retreat. It's in Austin this year in November. And that alone has just been so powerful because I just don't think we ever take the time. It's you've got a newborn. When you're in the thick of it, you're driving your kids to sports, you're doing this and that. You just never take the time to be hey, what are your hopes and dreams, babe? And even if you're the drag along spouse, you've got your hopes and dreams. but you may not be verbalizing them like the partner who's more of the entrepreneur, driver, all that kind of stuff. So for you to be on the same page and understand the why behind their goals is super powerful.
Well, like entrepreneurs, their speed of thought tends to be fast. And sometimes the person who just knows what they want first gets to decide. And creating that space for the other person who needs to process longer, to have more time to think about it. Like, we don't just do the event. Like, we come back to our goals over time. We teach that process. So it gives that person lots of opportunities to say, but I don't feel comfortable with that. But how could we make that? And it gives you a chance to try to find alignment between the two.
What have you guys seen over the years that makes a difference between the successful couples that come to your events and actually make a difference like, do you have couples that come year over year? Mm-hmm. What do you see those successful couples, like, what do they have in common, or what are some of the things that they do that help them make it a successful year?
Well, first, they make it a process, not an event. I think there are a lot of people who come, they have a fun weekend, and then they never a lot of businesses do this. They have a business plan, they get clear, and then they never look at it again.
Well, I think it's having that relationship with your goals,
Yeah, that's what we talk about is like, do you set goals or do you have a relationship with them? And if you have a relationship with someone, you go on dates. Yeah. So we have I love that. Yeah. So you have to go on dates with your goals, and there's a rhythm to that, right? Most Sunday mornings,
imagine if you met your goals and then you just never really had a date for a whole year, and you try to come back to them and they're like, no, I'm sorry, I've moved on.
Yeah, you come back after years like, oh, so what's up?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Hey, are you up?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Hey,
and you're
buddy.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, no, sorry, I've moved on. I went to somebody else. Yeah.
Facebook status.
Why am I getting ghosted?
Right. But I think that's number one.
Yeah.
And I think the other one is they get clear on their shared values. And I think that there's some things that you can do to get clear about. It's hard to articulate why. Why is that important to you? But if you go through just a few exercises, you can kind of get clear on like, well, what are we both striving for? And every couple has shared values. They just haven't uncovered, or they probably wouldn't be together. And when you can tap into those, like Wendy and I both share, like one of yours is making a difference, one of mine's impact. Different words for a very similar thing. So we often find alignment in our future by going back to that shared value, or they're close enough and say, look, well, how could we make a difference if we did do that? Now Wendy starts to get interested if it was my goal, and vice versa. So there's ways that you can kind of engage each other so that it becomes a shared goal versus it just being trading time in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah.
So this has been amazing.
Yeah,
I feel like I would love to chat with you guys all day, which we will. We will. Fortunately for everybody else, no. But the last question that we ask all of our guests is, what is your number one secret to success?
Oh, start. Well, for
I'm
me,
just looking at you.
you're thinking, yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's getting into business with the best people. I remember when I started my real estate team, now we've got almost, over 20 people on the team, and we're one of the top real estate teams in Texas. And I just thought it was really lonely. I thought real estate was really lonely. It's really hard. And so I never wanted to be alone in that. And, it's taken me a while to figure out how to hire and train and be a good leader and all that. That's been a 15-year journey for me. And now I understand that when I want to start the next business, I have a handyman and remodeling business. So what I did when I started that business is the first thing I did was look for the who. And getting into business with that right who, or a number of who's, it's literally everything.
I changed my world once I really understood that.
Yeah. That's kind of the ultimate business skill, right? Is succeeding through others and figuring out how that looks for you. That just opens so many doors, because now it's not about your time, it's a collective thing.
We added that as one of our core values at the company, success for the success of others, because it just multiplies, and then everybody wins. And when you get them in the right seat, oh my Lord, it's like magic.
Go, go, go. Yeah. Well, then you can kind of run towards what you want. Like a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we get into it for the freedom, but then we get really tied down in our business. And, you know, I have this handyman and remodeling business. I spend about 30 minutes a week on it. And it's going to be it's a 7-figure business. And so that's just the right person more than my 30 minutes of genius a week, you know?
My secret, like I was going to be cheesy and like say Wendy, right? I just tag along. But
cute.
I think my,
You're so nice to me.
We have a recorder, so we'll send it to you.
there we go. Which is true. Like I think it matters who you're working with a lot, whether it be a business partner or your spouse partner. Like those things can, like the people you spend the most time with really influence your mindset. They pick you up when you're down, all of those things. That's super, super important. And you kind of hit that from a professional side for sure. I just think also I'm just really persistent. I'm really good, almost to a fault, at not quitting on things once I decide that I want them. And that's helped me, you know, that you said earlier, the 3 feet from gold. Like I'm always imagining not just 3 feet. And so I'm very good at not quitting. And that's so important on almost anything. If you do it long enough for the right reasons, you'll get better and better at it and your results will amplify. So that has rewarded me a lot. I don't have shiny object syndrome too much. I'm really good. I like my rituals. So that's part of my nature that has served me well as an investor.
Love that. Love that. Well, before we wrap, where can folks find you guys online? Any of the resources, the couples retreats, all the amazing things that you guys have going on?
Well, you can find all of my stuff at wendyis.fun. So real estate team, handyman company. I've got another company called Her Best Life, which helps women leaders. Got a podcast called Empire Building. So yeah, just go there and you can see it all.
Same thing for me. I've got, not as cool, I've got jpapasan.com. I can't hide because I think there's only one Jay Papasan according to Google on Earth. So like people can find me. If you go to theonething.com, we have a lot of my work right now is tied through that business. That's where our goal setting retreat lives. And that's, you know, some of the stuff I'm most passionate about.
Yeah, you need to.
Yeah, that'd be great. We've had babies in the room before, so don't let that
Hon,
stop
if you're
you.
listening to this, we're putting that on the calendar.
She's got a 2-month-old. Is she really listening to your podcast?
No, definitely not.
I don't even think she's ever listened to it.
That's okay. That's okay.
I don't think Jay listens to mine either, so that's all good.
Listen.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. This was awesome, and really looking forward to what we're going to dive into next door here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, STR Nation, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. And in the comments, let us know what topics you want us to cover on upcoming episodes, and we'll make sure to get that in the books for you. And if you really want to learn how to launch, automate, and scale your short-term rental business, if you want to go deeper, then check out our free masterclass at strsecrets.com.